Hi all, welcome back to Make More Bonsai, John here. A few months ago, in early spring, we performed a quick redirection of energy on this juniper. Then, we set it aside to allow the Auxin hormone to reset to take effect and see how well it responded, and I'm happy to say it has roughly doubled its foliage mass in all the right places, and we're seeing new potential apical buds developing where they were expected to be after removing that one apically dominant branch. This is exciting. We made it through a hot summer here in Austin, Texas, and chickens were laying omelets hot this summer, but those days are finally behind us, and now cool mornings and evenings are back for autumn. For this climate, it's the weather is mild and warm days that extend well past what they would normally do if we were further north. Autumn is the time when trees are storing energy for next spring. At the same time, they're closing down operations and preparing for winter. There's a kind of shift from above ground expansion to expanding below ground, and foliage growth stops, leaves fall off, and next year's buds are visible. For junipers, the continuation of foliage growth really only slows down during the winter months. In the Mediterranean Texas climate of Zone 8, the timing for training junipers safely can extend through autumn. New buds and foliage growth remains active. In Zone 7 and lower, however, one needs to be more mindful of when the first frost is, and maybe not attempt too much bonsai work unless there's some winter protection available. We're going to take advantage of the favorable conditions to set up some refinement work on this tree. We can see evidence that the tree is healthy by the abundance of these extending runners all over the tree, as well as the overall filling in throughout. We set this up in spring when the main draw of energy to the apical bud was removed. It interrupted the influence Auxin had on the hormonal balance. This activated the cytokinin hormone throughout the tree, and new growth was spread out evenly across all branches, which is awesome. A big part of the heroic pace of this tree's recovery is because it's, as discussed in a previous video, a Kishu Shimpaku juniper grafted onto a San Jose juniper rootstock. The San Jose juniper moves resources faster than the Shimpaku. That really helped accelerate this tree's overall growth rate, and that's why we were able to jump right into some refinement work within 6 months of the initial energy redirect. To do that, we're going to clean up and apply wire. This will set up a more refined branch structure and expose the foliage to more light, to develop well-styled foliage pads and begin to develop the tree's apex within the tree's updated design. Much of this session will be selectively pruning excess foliage to expose some structure and make room for wire. This fall styling session will remove 40 to 50% of the foliage, maybe even less. I want to make sure there's enough foliage to ensure a healthy recovery through spring in the following year. Next spring, there will be some moderate selective pruning for more resource redirection as the new shoots emerge, so we can take more control over what parts are allowed to extend through spring and summer to encourage dense ramification, which will improve the quality of the foliage pads throughout the tree. To begin, we need to sort through the foliage and choose which branch and what foliage to keep to apply wire to, and decide what is not going to be an asset moving forward within the design and remove it. Let's talk a little bit about what to look for when cleaning up the foliage on a Shimpaku juniper. Many junipers, like the Shimpaku, send out lots of buds, kinda all over the place. These new buds radiate all around the main runner, as well as along the main branch, and often in spaces between the branches. These new buds send out young shoots that reach for light. Many are useful to enhance the tree and improve branch ramification. These branches should not be pruned off unless they're not needed in the design. Other buds, however, end up in places where they aren't able to produce much for the tree. Many of these poor producing shoots reside on the underside of a branch. They may be under some dense foliage that reduces the amount of light that can reach them, which reduces the sugar production through photosynthesis. They can actually draw more energy from the tree to grow and extend than give back. This energy can be better used to support the design. Removing them will enhance the branch silhouette by helping to maintain a clean line on the bottom of the branch, which helps separate the branches in the design. Also, shoots that emerge parallel to each other, removing one side and alternating them up through the branch will help open the area up for light and air to pass through the foliage, as well as maintaining an overall asymmetrical layout of the ramified branches. The final profile of the branch should be a series of alternating foliage masses along the sides, with some branches left on top to provide some volume when needed in the design. Doing all of this also helps open a clear path for wire to be applied to the branches. On a bonsai of this size, which is not particularly big and not particularly small, it's easy to get caught up in trying to reduce, and soon you may find you've taken too much foliage off the tree. It's important to take your time and consider each pruning decision and how it benefits the design and the health of the tree. When setting things up in autumn, I found that it's the best practice to leave more foliage on the tree, leaving branches a few more internodes longer than maybe what would perfectly fit in the design. This will help ensure a successful winter and a more energetic overall spring bud push. Then removing a bit more in early spring to direct energy when new buds are actively opening, followed by allowing for full extension through spring, then return for further refinement after it's recovered from that extension to push the design forward. Most of the branches are already in place on this tree. The initial wiring that set up some structure happened in previous years. That wire was removed before the redirect took place in early spring. This session is a second pass with wire that will be more focused on placing the branches, both primary and secondary, into position to create the foliage pads within the updated silhouette. To do this, open and spread those secondary branches to allow light to reach the interior to encourage more budding throughout the branch. The bends that are applied to these branches are subtle with gentle, uneven curves that should have the foliage on the outside of the curve. These uneven curve gestures help achieve a more natural look to the branches. If the branches are too curly and bend in wildly different directions, or are too equally measured in distance, the effect of naturally occurring branches may be lost. This isn't like setting up a curvy trunk where interesting bends can be a welcome sight. When setting up the branches, we are complementing the trunk and all of its groovy features with supporting foliage groupings that look and feel natural. Since this bonsai is not particularly large, there are fewer branches. What needs to be accomplished with 4 or 5 branches is create view portals into the tree at strategic areas of interest. Create separations among the branches to delineate each one. These separations also allow the eye to rest within the design in areas of interest, and begin to form the apex with the branches at the top. When setting up the main branch, I'm looking for a few areas at the end of the branch that I can place to extend the overall silhouette a bit more to the right. I would prefer that branch to be a bit longer. I think 1 more year of growth is all this tree will need to hit the desired target length, so I'm directing some of the growth using wire to accomplish that extension. All of the secondary branches along this main branch will be spread out to receive more light and help give this branch more visual dominance in the design. A section of that branch is also being set up to pass behind the trunk to provide more depth to the tree. This will be something that will contrast with the jin and shari of the trunk and provide something to look at past that jin, which will enhance the 3-dimensional qualities of the tree. The rest of the branches are also being spread out. As new buds begin to form and new branches appear on the interior, I want them to have access to light so they will develop into strong interior growth. This will open the design up to possibilities such as reducing their length, which will help reinforce the illusion of height to the tree. There is something to consider when refining a bonsai. What will work this year, and what will improve the tree in the following years as these branches grow and begin to lose proportion to the rest of the tree's design. Bonsai are an ever-changing and evolving, living thing. When you think 1, 2, or 3 years into the future, you set the tree up for continued success and maybe experience fewer setbacks in your design. Part of what I plan to accomplish with this tree is to have the jin emerging from the foliage at the top, and have more green foliage as a background to visually set apart the stark white jin to provide emphasis. Those branches behind the jin are also being spread out to encourage more access to light. These back branches will also enhance the 3-dimensional quality of the tree. I will be working on a rounded foliage area as the apex. This will contrast and help to further define the jin with its sharp angles and pointiness. Young trees will appear to have a defined extension to the top of the tree as it's still growing and reaching for light. This is illustrated by creating a defined triangular apex. As a tree ages and reaches its maximum height, the apex tends to expand outward, rounding out the appearance. A more rounded apex on a bonsai communicates an older tree. The jin and shari imply age on this tree. To be consistent with that overall design, I'd like to convey a more aged appearance to the apex. Considering the apex as a small tree on top of the big tree, we'll begin defining what will be the main branch, as well as secondary and back branches within that area. Over the next year or two, these will grow and extend, then get pruned and placed into positions that will achieve the desired contrast between the soft and rounded and the pointy angularness of the jin. To set that up, we will need to encourage some defined branches in that area to extend through the jin, and spread other branches in the apex around to encourage plenty of foliage to round off as it develops. This wiring is the first stage of that process. As the foliage grows and expands over a wider area, selective pruning in the following spring and late summer will help soften and create a rounded, more aged look and feel. Also, keep in mind, this is an ever-evolving process. Over time, older growth will be removed to make room for softer foliage. This is especially true for smaller trees. New growth can easily overtake the design. This is why setting up this structure at this point in time is essential. It'll provide the necessary design cues to follow as a framework for future restyling. Way back in early spring, we also did some shari building work. I'm looking to enhance that lower trunk with some interesting and textured shari that will push out and add to the curvy structure of the trunk. Here's an example of one that's on a bonsai tree, and here's one that is on an untouched juniper growing in the desert. Notice the evidence of growth, then die back, then more growth that tried to cover it but also eventually died back, as well as wood that was sort of pushed out as the other more protected side of the tree continued to grow. This push and pull over decades texture is what I'm trying to accomplish by adding more healed over wood where I want the shari to appear to give that trunk that extra feature and raise the overall value of this bonsai in general. If the wood was there already, it would be a matter of reducing and carving until the look is achieved, but the wood has to be there in the first place. This is a way to kind of model that wood like clay, only it's not clay. It's living tissue that's been redirected by selective and repeated encouragement of scar tissue growth. Since this isn't a 200-year-old blasted by wind and sand for a century or so trunk, that has to be built upon over time. You can see the results of about 2 years worth of building already in the rippled scar tissue that has grown over from the previous scar work. By removing some of the living cambium in strategic locations around the area, then allowing it to heal over, we are building what will be a multi-leveled stack of scars that, when the living tissue is finally removed to reveal the deadwood underneath, the expectation will be natural striations of wood built and removed over time. This operation is performed 2 or 3 times from spring through fall, allowing the area to heal over each time. In a few years, this trunk will have a shari that has an attractive play of the dark and light levels of texture from each layer growing over each layer of scar tissue. We have successfully created a few foliage pad foundations that help further define each branch. By doing so and placing them at these locations, we've created some gaps or portals into the main trunk to give the tree some depth. Also, there are some defined spaces between the branches. One thing to think about when creating these defined spaces is, are there places for birds to fly through? I know, kinda sounds a little silly, but stuff like that does help keep you on track when trying to create an illusion of a large tree in miniature. Which in and of itself is kind of out there, but if you're in the pursuit of creating bonsai, I guess being out there is already part of your DNA. So may as well embrace your inner out there-ness and have a good time while growing small things. You get what I'm saying. Thanks for taking the time to revisit this juniper as we journey through refining it. I'm looking forward to sharing all the progress it'll make in the coming year or two with you. This is where we stop and allow the fall and winter season to set up things for further refinement in spring. Thanks for watching. I hope you gained some helpful insights from this little video. If you have any thoughts you'd like to share or want to add to the conversation, any comments will be greatly appreciated. It'll help fill the time for the scar tissue to form on the shari before a new area needs to be carved out. While you're at it, maybe like and subscribe, or possibly check out the book or the t-shirt links, or we have a hat now, in the comments below, because bonsai stuff is kinda cool, and so are you for helping support this channel.